Welcome to the video presentation for Chapter 17 of CJC 390, focusing on the chapter about digital evidence, probably one of the most developing fields in crime scene investigation. As digital evidence continues to change, we have to keep pace with it, which is difficult. So for this particular chapter, we'll be talking about digital evidence and the sources of that, crime types that could involve the use and processing of digital evidence. We'll talk about the different types, and we'll talk about what an RCFL is. We'll also look at some of the unique challenges that digital evidence brings with it. We'll talk about procedures that we use to collect that evidence, and we'll talk about different issues regarding digital evidence. So what is digital evidence? Really, it includes so many different types of sources. We tend to focus upon one, but it's really essentially anything that has to do with the storage of data. So you can see the list here that keeps expanding based upon how society changes. What is the device of tomorrow? Smart watches, for example. Who knows what it could be? Google Glasses, things of that nature. We see computers, smartphones, any sort of media, even a CD or a DVD. So in addition to all the new sources, there's plenty of old sources that exist as well. So the unique thing about digital evidence is some evidence. So for example, if we look at blood evidence, it's something physical. It is there. It tells us about a crime that occurred. But what digital evidence is, it's not just physical, but it can be multiple things. It could be the target of a crime. So your computer or your files on your computer could be targeted by some source, or it could be the instrument of a crime. So in order to perpetrate some sort of attack, a terrorist, for instance, will use digital communications. So it's just a way that they can perpetrate a crime. Or it can simply be something that has evidence in it. So child pornography is a good example of this. So someone has a hard drive with lots of images that are illegal. It is simply the repository of evidence that documents that crime. So the types of crimes that digital evidence can be involved in is nearly endless. Really, any crime that you can think of, most likely. But fraud, obviously, is something that's perpetrated over the internet. Hacking occurs with groups that do it for white hat hacking or black hat hacking. Obviously, for good reasons or non-good reasons, it still could be illegal. Cyberbullying, stalking and threats, homicide, all sorts of things, like we talked about, terrorism, child pornography, things of that nature. Really just about any crime can involve digital evidence. What is some of the digital evidence that we are looking at today? We're looking at things like chat logs, anything that we can get to that is not encrypted. Encryption is a big issue these days. Obviously, just any way to communicate, like email. Child pornography cases or other types of cases, homicides, for example, could include the browsing history and information of that individual. Financial records, photos, videos, obviously, those that are illegal or those that document something illegal. Obviously, any documents. I remember when I worked narcotics cases, I would look for sometimes recipes for methamphetamine. That was somewhat common to find. False identification, counterfeit money, images, things of that nature, scans, spreadsheets, you name it. It could be evidence in a criminal case. So what is an RCFL? That is a Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory, and we are lucky enough to have one in the Kansas City area. In fact, one of my detectives who I work with is assigned to the Kansas City RCFL. And they strictly work with the processing of digital evidence. They're really not an investigative arm so much as a crime lab strictly for digital evidence, and they stay extremely busy. They stay very, very busy because the mountain of digital evidence that exists today. Some of the things that they focus upon, you can see obviously terrorism is high on the list, but any child pornography or crime of violence, even trade secret thefts. So now we're getting into corporate crimes or white-collar crime, financial crimes, and things of that nature too. So the RCFL helps out in many ways. They can help with seizing digital evidence at a scene. They don't do this as much as they used to because they have such a high workload. Oftentimes they'll rely upon the individual departments to seize the evidence and then turn it over to them for processing. Or they could do a little partial examination of what is submitted to them and tell the investigators what is found on there or what may be helpful for their case. And then they may testify in court, obviously, as to the evidence that they found. Triage is done at the scene and also by a crime scene investigator. It sounds just like it is. It's like a medical triage. They figure out what digital evidence is most important for us to look at right now or as soon as possible, and they figure out which they focus on first. Lots of challenges with regard to digital evidence. The fact that hardware continually changes. The desktop computers of yesterday are tiny. These days, laptops continue to change. What's a laptop? What's a tablet? And everything in between. Cell phones really have become new modern-day computers in your pocket. The cell phones today are much more powerful than the computers of yesterday. In fact, a cell phone today has much more power in it than a desktop computer that was used by NASA to launch the first Apollo mission. That's how much we have advanced. GPS devices, and of course phones have GPS chips in them now. Cameras, including phones. MP3 players really don't even exist anymore, but car stereos these days are computers, and game consoles have been used by terrorists to communicate. So the hardware that is used is difficult to keep up with. We have to have knowledge of the different hardware that is out there, and not only that, but what does that hardware operate off of? So you have multitudes of choices anymore. Obviously Microsoft, Windows is still popular. Apple has its own system. Android by Google is its own system, and it goes on and on and on. So who knows what the operating system of tomorrow may be, but a digital investigator could encounter any one of these. They could be presented with a Windows 98 machine, and they have to be able to figure out the contents of that machine, but they also have to be able to figure out the latest iteration of Windows. And Android changes more quickly than that. Also, the location of where the crime was committed. So we talked early in the course about primary and secondary crime scenes, about where a body may be located and things of that nature. Well, think about a digital crime and where it could be. The victim could be in Overland Park, Kansas, and the suspect could be in Kenya. It's just very difficult to figure out where the crime occurred, where our suspect is. Is it a local crime? Who investigates it? Because that's really one of the big reasons why the FBI has stepped more into the realm of computer crime investigations, because these crimes tend to span not only national borders but international borders as well. People who are very adept at digital crimes or computer-based crimes also are adept at setting up systems to cause problems to investigators. So self-destruct program and things of that nature. So we, for example, it may be coming up here, tell investigators not to use the shutdown mechanisms common to the system, which could be right-clicking or on a bottom left corner and choosing shut down or something of that nature, because some hackers, some people who are adept at this type of stuff may set up a program where that is a self-destruct mechanism. So if you do that, it wipes the hard drive clean. And instead, we tell investigators just to pull the power and let it gently power down at some point, and they'll process the hard drive later. And because we also have many folks in the world who are somewhat adept at navigating a computer, so their curiosity may get the best of them, and they may try to take a look through a system from what they know, but unknowingly they may cause problems or alter evidence and cause chain of custody concerns later in court. Other challenges, systems today are a little bit more robust than they used to be in the past, but they're still very easily broken. Most of us have probably broken our phones in the past or dropped a laptop or something of that nature, and really damaged our computer, our hard drive, or the display, or something like that. But other elements can cause problems such as water, heat, cold. Magnets obviously can still tamper with memories, and as we talked about, drop. So the law regarding search and seizure for digital evidence continues to change too. It's probably changing to become a little bit more restrictive, but that can change too as, again, terrorists use digital computers and things of that nature to communicate. That could open up some windows to some digital evidence, but in some respects it's more difficult too. The Supreme Court is tending to lean towards securing people's cell phones and things of that nature, requiring either a search warrant or consent. As with all types of evidence, it is much better to get a search warrant than to rely upon one of the, earlier in the course, one of the exceptions that we talked about in the first week, or consent. So the collecting of evidence, if an expert is available, we prefer to do that, but with only a few regional computer forensics laboratories spread throughout the nation, experts aren't always available, so we often leave it to lay personnel to do this. And again, we recommend that power is pulled, or if it is off, just leave it off. Do not power up the device. Connections, photograph if possible. Again, every system is a little bit different, so you might take a look at the back and see how the connections are set up, so the investigator, if they have to replicate that at some point, they can do that, and might even go to the extent of labeling those connections too. So taking a look at the setup and photography and things of that nature, even photograph it all, including the connections, so it can be replicated. Or leave the connections in place. That's another thing to do. Obviously, network connections we have to remove. We want to remove any possibility of the suspect being able to communicate with that device when it is processed later. So these days you'll find mobile communication cards in there for whatever data plan that they are on through a commercial cellular network, so they can maybe communicate with that device if it's powered up in the lab. We do not want that. And even if it does look as if the suspect took great gains either to physically destroy a device and its contents, or to wipe it clean through electronic means, or even if they've said that they've done that, we shouldn't assume that the evidence is bad and it can't be recovered. Even if we find, for instance, a cell phone in water, we should send it to the RCFL or the local computer forensics lab and let them have a shot. It's remarkable how data can survive. Cellbrite is a device that is specifically used to process cellular phones or smartphones, which again are computers these days, and Cellbrites can dump the contents for an investigator to look at, whether it be photographs or chat logs or GPS data or anything, phone logs, everything on the computer, and of course internet searches too. Cellbrite can help us look at the contents. This is just one of many different ways that digital investigators look for this information. See, Cellbrite does things like link analysis too, so you can see the most frequent contacts and who called who, and dumping 2 or 3 different phones. It can link different parties together, and you might even develop like a conspiracy case for Cellbrite analysis. Another type of digital evidence, particularly these days, is video evidence. You still have analog systems out there which are not digital, but most of your security cameras that you run in today, including IP cameras that many people use in their own homes, are digital systems. So in processing video evidence, we look at many different things like the location of the video camera, the angle at which the footage was taken. The angle can distort height measurements, for example, of a suspect or a victim. And we'll note different locations where the camera, what was in the camera view. So we might take a measurement of the height of a table or something along those lines, or a street light, and note that for our records, so the digital investigator later might be able to get an approximate height of a suspect, for example. We also will look at the actual time as compared to what is displayed on a video feed. So sometimes a video feed may have a time that's a few seconds off here or there, and we'll take note of what time it is Greenwich Mean through perhaps a cellular carrier as compared to what it was on the actual video. So it is an original copy. But we always look at the point of view and try to determine if it gives an accurate portrayal. Really, there aren't any cameras these days that show a true representation of the field of view of an officer. So even dash camera and body camera videos can show a little bit different angle than perhaps what the officer was actually looking at, and it may miss some detail. Infrared systems are those that specialize in taking video in dark conditions. The important thing to note about infrared is it's a different type of lighting source, so it tends to alter the colors on the camera systems. What you see is not exactly what you get. So the suspect clothing, for example, may be described by a victim or a witness in one way, and then we look at the infrared video feed and it looks different. That's because the lighting is different. Aspect ratio is the length and height of the video image too. So aspect ratio is important because it can alter the characteristics of what the suspect looks like. So this is actually the same shot from a video in the bottom right corner there. You can see the aspect ratios are different. So the suspect or subject anyway, in the hat there appears to be slightly taller in the right image than in the left because the aspect ratio was off. That's why it's important to take measurements. You can see some sensor poles here right at the exit. If I was the investigator, I would want to know what's the height of those sensors, because we can look, the subject is standing pretty close to those, so we can get a fair estimation of their approximate height. Lossy data compression means that with video evidence in particular, we all know that they're big files. If you've ever tried to download a movie or something like that, or even upload a YouTube video to share with others, it takes a lot longer than it does to share a picture because videos are large files. So there are systems which tend to reduce the size of those files, but in the course of doing so, they tend to lose detail. So the more you reduce a video image, you lose detail. So it's akin to looking at your TV as high definition or standard definition. We all know HD video is much clearer, has more detail. Same is true with any type of digital video.